it's called a simple assault.
Mm,
There's different types of aggravated assault. The
yeah.
difficult part is to discern when does it go from a simple assault all the way up to aggravated assault. We have to respond to the same level of force that's coming against us without going beyond that level of force. Speaking of Canadians, I just had my fill of Canadians. It's
Nice.
been no, I'm kidding. Really great people. I just spent a few days in Toronto, as you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
doing some training up there with Joey Combat and Mark Medeiros. Really
Yeah.
great guys, high level martial artists at the Combat Arts Training Academy. Did some
Sweet.
stuff for them there. Really great people. Very passionate about the topics that I was doing.
Nice. Yeah.
And I had a great time. A lot of fun. Very hospitable.
Sweet.
Um, and yeah,
That
so
is the Canadian way. I even seen you got to do some axe throwing.
I did do some axe throwing. I
Nice.
did, and I started to say a boot,
A boot.
and
Oh my God. No one says
and
that in Canada,
and
bro.
everybody says a boot and a and a
Oh,
boot. It's like
what
it's
about
like
a rip?
what's that all about, eh?
What's that all a boot, eh? At least you got the A right. I've never met anybody who says a boot
Like
other
Mackenzie
than
brothers
South
too.
Park.
I don't know if the audience is old enough to remember the Mackenzie brothers. Do you know the Mackenzie brothers?
No, no.
Come on, dude, you're Canadian. You don't know the Mackenzie brothers?
Like,
All right, all right. I'll skip. I'll skip.
I'll skip. I'll skip. We'll see.
Another time. We'll do a whole episode just on the Mackenzie brothers.
Who is it? No, now I'm interested. You gotta tell me.
It's like, Kevin, your man card is revoked. No, I'm
Well,
not talking about. No, you have to do your homework.
dude, I am so bad when it comes to terminology and everything like that. Like, that's why I love my guru, Joe Hungar, because that guy is like an
No,
encyclopedia for
Mackenzie
FMA, and
brothers
I
were
am the exact opposite.
Mackenzie brothers are comedians.
Oh, yeah, no, no idea. No idea.
They were comedians back in the day.
Oh, okay. I'll
So
check it out. Boomer.
I'm dating myself. I'm dating myself.
Yeah, no kidding. Sweet man. So I'm super stoked for today. For those of you guys that kind of know me but don't really know me, I'm a ones and zeros kind of guy. I'm a black and white guy. Data trumps absolutely everything in my world. And Liv, my partner, and I, we were talking yesterday, and it was like, do you know what, babe? I think Todd Fossey is the only guy who is more black and white than I am. It's funny when we were talking about our first episode. It's like I'm the gray guy here, and he's the black and white guy.
uh, I
This is
am
interesting.
I am deep black and stark white. How's
It's
that?
dark white, yeah,
Well,
yeah,
well, for me, it's evidence over eminence, right? And in our industry, it's eminence over evidence. Like, oh, that guy has eminence, so I'm going to listen to what he say, even if
yeah,
it's pure garbage. It comes off well, so it's packaged well, so I'm gonna drink that bull crap. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
And I'm a data freak like you. I pour over data all the time. I'm a certified force science analyst on top of the other stuff that I teach.
Yeah.
And so that's what it's all about. What does the data tell us? How violence actually occurs, and
Yeah.
what it looks like, so that we can prepare ourselves for that, right? As opposed to some arbitrary, fantastic idea about what social media tells us it is, or what we think it is, or what somebody cherry picked that fits their narrative, or some marketing plan, right?
Yeah,
We have to prepare for the truth. We have to prepare for reality.
for sure. And I think
Um,
there's another one I'd throw in there is what that martial arts instructor told you was actually legal or not, right? Because it's crazy. Like I remember growing up in the day, and it was like, you see a fair fight, it's two guys square off, they smash each other
yeah.
up pretty good. There's no like crazy gang beatings. I mean, there was, but it was different, right? And you basically pick the guy up after. It's like, let's go for a beer. right?
Yeah.
And like that's when it was it was cool. It was different.
Yeah.
Right? It was more of a test of your manhood. And you know what? We
Yeah.
both had egos in that moment, and we both
Yeah.
hit each other's fists. And
Yeah.
but I
It's a
would
right,
probably say,
a right to passage,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I haven't really seen a fair fight though since I was like 18, 19 years old, right? Like not one that is, a duo per se, right?
Yeah.
Um, so it's interesting because I would say over the last 20 to 25 years for myself, there's been this whole new understanding and a lot of work on my end of actually looking into the laws and regulations of countries, because what works for me in Canada definitely doesn't work for some of the states. What works in Canada typically is very similar to the UK, which is again more similar to Australia. Like being in the comment section, I get to learn a lot about different countries, right? And I I thought I knew a lot, right? But when you start breaking it down simplistically, I think that's where there's a lot of people that have misconceptions of what an assault really is.
Whoa! Boom! The self-defense industry is broken, wouldn't you agree? Have you gone from martial art to martial art looking for the responses that you need to have for a self-defense situation? Well, I spent 35 years training in martial arts. I acquired 7 different black belts to find out that when I pressure tested their shit, it didn't work. So what did I do? I had to come up with my own system. Make sure to check it out at budobrothers.com. Build the confidence you need to stay safe.
And today,
Yeah.
like, I can't wait to have this discussion with you, because not only are we going to be able to break that down for the average person and give them a better understanding, because they don't have to go and do all the Google and research and everything like that. They can just come and listen to, two idiots
Yeah.
talking about self-defense and having fun, right?
Speak for yourself. Speak for yourself, Kevin.
Okay. Yeah, it's a big data.
Well, it goes even farther than that, because it's really like in the United States, it's really jurisdictional. So it's
Yeah.
really going to come down to like municipalities.
Hmm.
Yes, there are state laws, but there are also municipal laws based on what the laws are within that city.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the point that I'm making is no matter where you're going and where you're traveling, you have to know what the laws are for the use of force in that state and what those definitions are, which are very subjective, by the way.
Hmm.
They're extremely subjective. So, um, like for example, when I was just up there in Canada, for one of the people I was working with was a police officer,
Yeah.
and so immediately I started asking him, going over what the laws of engagement were and other types of laws, so that I could just have my framework in place
Yeah.
just in case I needed to defend myself or somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's an important data point for your audience to understand. Like when I travel within the United States, I have a book that I
Yeah.
literally goes in my backpack, and no
Yeah.
matter where I go, I can open that book and know what the laws are within that state and within that jurisdiction.
Nice. Wow, that's
In
awesome.
case my cell phone goes down, I can't get my cell phone, or I don't have good coverage there, I can at least open my book and know. Or if I'm traveling between states, I'm going from one state to another, before I go into the next state at my stop, before I get into that state, I can stop and I can do a little study. It's
Yeah.
also good for your defense, for your legal defense.
Yeah.
So if there is an incident, you have to defend yourself, you can show that you've done your due diligence. It's literally
Mhm.
in your backpack, it was on your person,
Yeah.
and so you weren't just like flying by the seat of your pants, and that
Nice.
can really work for you as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
think being prepared, especially when you travel, I get a lot of questions like, when are you free, right? Because there's this fine line in my world of like being prepared and being paranoid, right? And I am the protector in my family, you know, and because of that, I choose to take on a certain role. So if my family and I are going somewhere like on vacation outside of the country, I'm doing research, through Google satellite images. I'm looking around the area.
yeah.
I'm seeing how close it is to the nearest whatever hospital, et cetera, right? And I do all of these things. And, my girlfriend's like, what are you doing? She's like, we're going to Mexico. You'll be fine. I'm like, yeah, but what if you guys want to go out of the resort one day? And she's like,
Yeah.
well, are you okay with that? I'm like, it all depends on the area that we go. Is it safe?
Yeah.
Is it not? What's the cartel like lately? What's the police like lately in Mexico? Right?
Yeah.
Like, where there's all these things that are taking place, and people wouldn't even think twice about that. But in Canada, when we go out and we're going for a walk, if we're going somewhere nice, yes, I feel more safe, but I'm just my head's on a swivel. I'm always aware. I'm always doing those things. And part of that preparation is learning those laws of what can and can't I do. For me, what can I carry? What can't I carry? Right. And for you, used to having a firearm on your side, are you allowed to
That's it.
carry? How are you supposed to transport that? Right? Can you
So
transport it through a state if you're driving? Or, like, I've never had to fly with a pistol before. I have no idea what that process is like. But I don't want
yeah.
to, kind of digress too far from the base of it. Is our number one thing we want to be talking about today is what are the different types of assaults, right?
Yeah.
And what's some of that data to back up the likelihood of those assaults taking place?
One thing I do want to point out before I forget
Please,
is
yeah, yeah,
I think it would be good. I'm also an executive protection agent, right? And one of the things that I teach at Integrative Defense Strategies is I teach families how to be their own security detail, like for real. Like the things that we do in executive protection, we reinvent for what's realistic for families. And what you're describing is a small portion of what we call advanced work.
yeah, yeah,
So that might be something really important, especially with the direction that the world is going in today, that we do a
sure,
breakdown for how people can, we call it family security operations.
nice, yeah,
So instead, and close protection, like we can cover the close protection part, the kinetic part of it, but the operational side of it
mm,
is a really big deal. So maybe we should talk about that in the future.
yeah, definitely.
Um, Different types of assaults, man. Well, the reason I go is because so much data goes through my head all at once. It's like, all right.
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah,
just
yeah,
sorting through my thoughts. Um, I think that maybe we should start with a few definitions. So as we're talking about things, people can understand what that terminology means, and that
nice,
maybe
yeah,
it'll help them to
absolutely.
organize things for themselves when they're out there. Um, to put it simply for now, let's talk about simple. It's called a simple assault.
Okay,
And a simple assault means that you're reasonably in immediate fear of bodily harm. What that means is, within reason, you're fearful of being injured, being banged, bruised, lacerations, scrapes, things like that. But you're going to make a full recovery, and it isn't going to require any type of medical intervention. So that's what a simple assault is. So file that away if you're watching. Okay.
well,
Then
it
there's
was funny.
different types of. Go
Yeah.
ahead. Go ahead.
It was like I immediately, because I'm always processing information, right? I grabbed my phone and I started making my notes right away. And I was like, why am I making notes? This is the whole idea of doing a podcast, is to put information out there for people. So yeah, if you guys want to make notes, fantastic. Ideally, maybe we'll even have chapters in the video, who knows?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
also getting to this idea and this understanding of this is the homework you guys need to do. And if you can, you just reference this podcast and it will help you.
Yeah.
And that's exactly
Yeah.
what it is. Like, I'm just going to rewatch it later to get better at
Yeah.
this.
Just have it be a reference.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great
Nice.
idea.
Nice.
Then there's different types. When you hear me use the term aggravated assault,
Mm,
there's different types of aggravated assault. And so that's going to also vary from state to state or province to province or jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But generally, what that means is you're reasonably in immediate fear of substantial bodily harm, which I'll give you a definition of that in a second,
yeah.
or great bodily harm or death.
Okay.
So substantial bodily harm means that you are reasonably in immediate fear of prolonged loss or impairment of any bodily member or organ. That means that your eye isn't going to be working for a while.
Mm,
It's going to make a full recovery, probably,
yeah.
but your eye's messed up for a while.
Yeah.
Your arm is messed up for a while. or whatever, any bodily member or organ that's prolonged loss of. So that's substantial. Then there's great bodily harm or death, which means there's a reasonable and high probability that you're actually going to die. And
Mm,
both of them will require fairly major medical intervention. The
yeah.
difficult part is to discern when does it go from a simple assault all the way up to aggravated assault or substantial bodily harm, and when it's substantial bodily harm, right? And that's part of where training comes in, so that you can learn to recognize that and make those decisions, which we have to remember. This is fairly universal almost everywhere, but make sure you're checking out the laws in your state or jurisdiction.
Yeah.
That we have to follow what's called the use of force continuum,
Yeah.
which means that we have to respond with the same level of force that's coming against us legally, legal force, not the exact force, but the legal. We have to respond with the same level of force that's coming against us without going beyond that level of force.
Yeah.
So when you hear things like the +1, whatever level of force they're using, you can use +1. That's not true for outside
For
of most
civilian.
law enforcement
Yeah.
for civilians.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to legally meet the same level of force. That means we have to be able to recognize it and have all of those intermediate skills in between all the different styles of attacks and level of force. We have to be able to recognize that and meet that force where we're at. So that means we're always in a reactionary role, where that puts us at a disadvantage, because that puts the attacker in proactive role. So
Yeah.
we're reactive and they're proactive, which is harder for us.
Yeah, much harder.
Uh,
Much harder.
and
I
then
think there's
hold on one second.
Yeah.
Well, let me finish my thought, because they need to know this. Then the moment in most jurisdictions a reasonable means of retreat becomes available, you must retreat. Now, listen, even if you're in a stand your ground or castle doctrine state, make no mistake, that part of your decision making will be a part of your civil defense, even
Mm,
if you're legally justified.
mm,
Okay, so keep that in mind. And also, if the attacker is leaving within reason, if they're not going to harm somebody else,
yeah.
okay, which gets us in what we'll talk about in future episodes into the legalities governing the use of force. But I think if we're going to be talking about different styles of attacks and how we're going to be responding to them, we at least have to know the use of force continuum. Sorry, go ahead with what you're going to say.
I was just going to say I think when I first started learning this, there was a whole bunch of new words and new terminologies that came out there that was, a little confusing. So if we just break it down real quick for, like as if we were teaching me, right? Or a child of, it's like, so we have our basic simple assault. And then after simple assault, was
Aggravated,
aggravated assault.
there's different levels of it. That's a big legal, and that might even be too granular for most people who are
Okay.
outside of who are not professionals. But
Yeah.
so outside of the simple assaults, we'll just put it simply, there's fear of substantial bodily harm.
Okay.
And great bodily harm or death. Substantial means prolonged loss or impairment of any bodily member or organ.
Okay.
And then great bodily harm or death means that limb or bodily organ is never going to recover. It's never going to be the same, or there's a high probability of death and the need for major medical intervention.
Okay, so I'm definitely more of an example kind of guy. So if we were to
Yeah,
break down a simple assault, because I think that's what a lot of people are worried about. Like, it's not necessarily getting ambushed and put in a headlock and starting to get punched. Like some people
yeah,
are worried
yeah,
about
it
that.
is. It is actually.
Yeah, right.
That's
Well,
a
and
that
that's the thing.
no, but that's a simple assault.
Yeah.
That's a simple assault, right?
Yeah, right. Because and I think that's where there's this line like we talked about in the first episode of like, okay, is it self-defense or is it martial arts? What are we doing to prevent all these things? And like being good at self-defense means that you never get in a fight. That you never, and I use the word fight, it's not defending yourself, it's you
Right.
have excellent environmental awareness, you have excellent situational awareness, you're preventing all these things from happening. So what we're really talking about then is more of an ambush attack. Would you agree with
Yeah.
that? Or,
Well, how about the way that I put it is
yeah.
this: there's a difference between um, a fight and an attack. A
Yes.
fight is a fight is mutual. A
Yeah.
fight is a duel. There's road rage. You're both amped up. There's many different dynamics in which that can happen, but
Yep.
it's mutually agreed upon,
Okay.
right? But an ambush is asymmetrical. An ambush is one person isn't prepared for it, and the other person is imposing their will. And what's interesting about that is that the overwhelming majority of attacks, both simple assaults and aggravated assaults,
Yeah.
the intent is actually hidden until the last possible moment.
Oh,
So
okay.
no matter how good a situational awareness you have, and it can help
Yeah.
because we live in close proximity to other people, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What happens is it's just on. And in the future, we'll do a timeline breakdown for how long things take at what distances,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
how our mind responds and processes the timeline,
Yeah.
especially under stress. That's really important to understand. Not for today.
Okay.
Really great information, but it's important to understand, I think, those distinctions, and maybe as we progress forward, we'll have some common terminology for between us and our audience. Does that help?
Nice. You're gonna have to re-say that last minute.
Did I,
So live
did I glitch?
your camera just glitched out. So
Oh, what was I saying?
um
It's how it's important for us to have a common language, so
nice.
that so in the future,
Yeah,
that
perfect.
way when we talk about these terms, the audience knows what that means, and we can review it a little bit, right? But without not maybe not as in depth.
Okay.
So an example of a simple assault. There's many, and
Do
it
you want
really
to
comes.
re-say what when your camera glitched, or do you want to just
I don't know when my camera glitched.
okay? Yeah, it was like 30 seconds, but not a big deal. I'll just tell Liv that
Okay.
this has happened, and she'll do her best to kind of cut it. But
Okay. Okay.
okay, so let's go to the example, right? And the reason why I'm using the headlock kind of reference is my headlock video is like over 175 million views now. So obviously everybody was scared of a headlock. I think it was just more relatable than anything because everybody's been put into a headlock. But so let's go, somebody attacks you. So it's not an agreed upon fight. Somebody attacks you and they put you in a headlock and they're just holding you in the headlock.
Yeah. Well,
What is yeah,
this is a continuum, right?
yeah,
So it kind of depends.
okay,
So, but if they're just holding you in a headlock,
yeah,
that's a simple assault.
simple assault. And it's a simple assault because they could have hurt you in that process by putting you in the headlock. Or
Anytime anybody puts their hands on you, it's a simple assault.
there you go. Awesome.
And by the way, even a verbal threat can be considered a simple assault.
Yeah,
Okay.
I want to get to those verbal stuff later. Make sure we come back to that
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's where I feel a lot of people have no idea if they are allowed to attack or not. But let's save that for the use of force continuum. So now let's go to somebody puts you in a headlock. Oh yeah,
Okay, go ahead. No, go ahead.
and
Sorry.
they start punching you in the head.
Do you feel as though the punches are hard enough and they're doing enough damage where you reasonably are in fear of prolonged loss of consciousness or loss of consciousness? Because the moment you feel like you're going to experience loss of consciousness, now it becomes aggravated. Because once you're unconscious, they can do anything to you, and you can argue and articulate that you could reasonably no longer continue to defend yourself.
Interesting. So
Same with if they're cutting off your air or your blood to your brain,
yeah,
right? But the moment it goes around your throat,
yeah.
now that's an immediate aggravated assault, and that person is showing lethal intent.
Which makes perfect sense, right? Is it where we live on, Earth, we need air in order to breathe. If you're going to take air away from me, my life is now in danger. So this is kind of a huge question I get a lot, both from my students and from the comments section. It's like, okay, so they're in the headlock, they're getting punched. Let's say in that moment though that I don't know how hard those punches are. I'm all jacked up on adrenaline.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
training kicks in. I'm taking the punches off the forehead. Obviously, they're hurting, but isn't it subjective then to
It's
like
all subjective.
Okay.
It's all subjective. Yeah. And how a prosecutor is going to perceive things, or a jury or a judge is going to perceive things, is very subjective. And you should know prosecutors also, well, in the United States right now, prosecutors are basically, I think we have to say it because it's a part of your legal defense. In the United States, prosecutors are basically political activists now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. They're funded
Yeah.
by certain, right. And not only are they do they have a bias, not all, of course, but
Yeah.
most have
Yeah.
bias now, but also they're completely uneducated when it comes to the use of force. They don't know. They may think they know,
Yeah.
but they haven't been formally educated or formally trained
Yeah.
on the use of force or what it's like in reality.
Well, and you've
And
actually,
same with judges.
yeah, like you've been
Same.
called in as a self-defense expert,
Uh,
use of force expert. So like when Todd is talking about this, guys and girls, like this is exactly the why I have Todd on here, because he's an expert for this. And there's this, like what I'm hearing
uh,
when you're
uh,
talking about this is like, I need my lawyer to have conversations with you or an expert
yeah,
before
you
they
know,
tell me the things to
well,
say.
it's funny. Defense lawyer. I consult defense lawyers.
Yeah, I
I
don't
can
doubt
I
that.
can I consult and I educate defense lawyers too,
Yeah,
because a lot of defense lawyers want to know this,
for
right?
sure. Yeah. Well,
Um,
if
and
the
and
money's
if
right.
I can I just interject something? And I know this is kind of a semantic thing, but since 2020, I don't think that the word expert has any value anymore. There's no more, like, that means nothing.
Yeah,
So
that's
I'm a person who has a lot of education experience and training in the area.
nice.
And so I don't consider myself to be an expert. I mean, if certain people out there in the world are experts,
Yes.
then
Yeah.
that means nothing. That means nothing anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I completely hear you.
And in the self-defense world, you have these people with these really popular channels that call themselves experts that it just couldn't be farther from the truth,
Yeah.
you know? And
It's so true.
I would just rather say I'm not one,
Yeah.
but I have a lot of formal credentials. Let's put it that way.
There. Nice. Sweet. So you're an expert, but not.
For whatever that,
Yeah,
whatever
whatever
that
that
means.
means. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Because
I think we need to be intellectually honest.
yes. Well, and I appreciate that, right? I mean, it is semantic, but it's also the truth, right? Because you and I both know the industry is full of experts when really they have no training or have backed it up.
They're full of charlatans,
Yes.
or they've taken a credential and they're credentialists and they've built their whole thing off of credentials when
Yeah.
it's the other way around. They don't have any real practical or hands-on,
Yeah.
or if they do, it's very superficial,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
As opposed to being like, I want all of it. You know,
For sure.
I am all of it, and I want
Yeah.
to be all of it. But I
Yeah.
don't want to get outside. I know what my scope is, and I don't want to get outside of my scope. If it's outside of my scope, I'll go, oh, that's for somebody else.
Exactly. Exactly.
But
So
we want a broad scope and we want a deep scope. That's
yeah,
the idea.
which makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. Yeah, I think that's why it's so important as like a self-defense person like myself. Um, in my self-defense class, like our classes are half theory, half physical. In my Gong Fu program, which is like my MMA built for the street program, I don't talk a lot about it. We train with the self-defense mindset. I make sure that if somebody, is in guard and gets a sweep to a better position, they're not grounding and pounding from mount. Their head is on a swivel and they're like, can I exit? Can I move?
Yeah.
Because if they start grounding and pounding, I jump on top of them. I'm like, multiple
Yeah.
attackers. Where was your
Exactly.
head, right? But that's
That,
just the mindset. And I think we can talk a lot about that another day. But so
yeah.
back to the legalities of this, without going too deep into it, is I think it's very important for the audience to know that you have to be able to have the right answers before something happens to you, right?
You
And
have to be able to articulate your justification for use of force.
yeah, because like the police officers I train, they're like, listen, we'll interview on the spot. We'll call you an interview or come in person 24 hours later, and then we'll come back and see you in 72 hours. And if your story lines up and your story is the same, then everything should be okay. Everything's fine. The camera matches everything you said, other witnesses, like all of these things, line up and match. It's great. But a lot of people don't know that, right?
In the
They'll use
United,
the wrong word, and the wrong
in
word
the
can be
United
used against them.
in the United States, it's very different.
Yeah.
Don't answer their questions.
Wow. Really?
No, because anything you say can be used against you in a court of law, and under stress, your syntax and semantics can be distorted and unintentionally. So
Wow.
we don't answer any questions. We say,
Nothing.
officer, I know you're just doing your job. I'd be happy to cooperate with you after I've spoken with counsel. And
Wow.
what that means is I'm going to get with my lawyer. I'm going to
Yeah.
calm down. I'm going to
Yeah.
articulate and I'm going to go through multiple drafts of writing my statement
Yeah.
with, with with the advice of my lawyer. The
Okay.
irony in my case is it would be my lawyers who would be asking me for advice,
Yeah.
right? Like I advise, but that's what's interesting about
Yeah.
and ironic about what we do. Yes, I won't go down that rabbit hole right now. Is
Yeah.
that you can reach a level of understanding that surpasses the infrastructure,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
then they're like, they don't even understand what you're talking about. So you have a level of sophistication.
For
Anyway,
sure.
that's another digression.
Okay.
But I
Okay.
think
So let's go back to the.
that's an important data point from jurisdiction to jurisdiction.
Nice. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great point.
What were you going to say?
So we're getting punched in the face. I'm in a headlock. I'm getting punched, and I don't feel like I'm going to go unconscious. What are some of the reasons why maybe I'd feel that way? Like maybe one, I've been in enough fights that I know how much damage I could take. Two, I'm protecting myself well enough by tucking my chin down and taking it off of the forehead that I hope my training will kick in.
Yeah. Yeah.
When does it get to a point where it's like, man, I'm really in trouble here, and
A
I
lot of it, a lot of it comes down to the disparity in force, meaning disparity in force means how big are you?
okay.
How old are you? What's your physical condition? Did you just have surgery? Like you're a
Mhm.
big dude, but if you just got out of spine surgery, right, and you're in a weakened state, and
Yeah,
your ex-girlfriend who's still mad at you from 5 years ago
yeah,
sees you on the street and comes and puts you in a headlock, and you're in a weakened state, and she doesn't even have to know that you're in a weakened state. If she could re-injure your spine,
yeah,
or if you're in a reasonably in fear of her severing your spine because of what things like that.
yeah.
So it's always the answers are always going to be circumstantial. You see,
Okay,
there's no absolute answer. That's why I said there's no absolute answer to a contextually dependent question.
okay.
And this is one of my big beefs with the firearms training industry and with the martial arts and self-defense industry is they absolute answers sell,
Yeah,
but there are no absolute answers. But I
yeah,
can give you some examples that gives you a kind of a general framework for how that might work. It's going to come down to the disparity in force,
okay.
right? And what is reasonable.
Yeah,
And then it comes down to who's defining what's reasonable. What's the prejudice of the prosecutor? What's the prejudice of the law enforcement? What's the
yeah,
prejudice of the judge or the jury or whatever
yeah,
the case may be? But again, why we need to be trained in this and why we need to couple our decision making,
yeah,
our legal decision making too. You learned that when you came out here to train
yeah,
with us, right?
yeah,
I was constantly asking the question, were you justified to use that level of force? If so,
yeah,
why?
yeah.
And then that helps you learn how to articulate your decision making.
Hmm.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
So
I mean, that
there's
was it was
go ahead.
definitely, it was really cool being in the course because I've always had those thoughts and I've always been thinking about it, and I'll explain it to my classes. But when you're forced on the moment to really like, was that justified? Yes or no? And you're having to make that decision now. Well, one, out of fear because you don't want to look bad on the course, right? Two, because I was like, shit. I was like, I'm normally thinking about this internally, but now I have to also allow this to be
Yes.
visible. And I'm
Yeah.
doing so not with like 5 minutes later, or I typically tell my students, like, at what point in the training tonight, when you go home and shower and you get rid of all the sweat and blood and everything, at what point were you justified in doing what you needed to do? In and according to Canadian law as a civilian. Because that's how I break it down. Usually I'm like, are you a civilian? Are you law enforcement? Or are you military?
Yeah.
right? And you
So
have to
that way because the thing for us as a citizen defender, right? We can't underreact or we're going to get seriously hurt or killed.
yeah,
But we can't overreact either, or we go to prison,
yeah,
right? So we have to know, and the criminal doesn't care.
yeah,
They're a psychopath. They don't care about consequences. They don't
yeah,
know. They don't care, right? So this is why we need to train our decision making, all different types, tactical decision making, legal decision making, a lot of different decisions
yeah,
along with our motor skills. The way that we do it at IDS is we'll do an immediate debrief.
yeah.
So say, for example, I'm training and I go to a higher level of force. After I've gone to that level of force, I'll stop with my partner and what I'll do is I'll do a debrief on what just happened
Hmm.
and what my level of use of force was and why. And sometimes I go, you know what? I think I used too much force.
Hmm.
Can we redo that again? Can we remediate it right now, immediately?
Nice.
Um,
Nice. Yeah.
yeah, so that's just one example for how we can apply this in training. Otherwise, it's just empty training. It's like junk food. It's like empty calories, right?
Yeah.
It's a dance class.
Yeah.
Yay, we're doing a dance class, but it's not filled with any contextualized decision making,
Mm, yeah, it makes
right?
sense. Okay, so I'm in the headlock. I'm getting punched. Let's say I'm 5'5". My attacker is also 5'5", so we're same, and we're just gonna say we're in the same weight class.
And how old? How about age?
Same age. Well, we'll just say best case scenario.
What about what about gender? Binary
Same,
gender,
same.
same.
Yeah,
So same gender. So you're essentially the same. Okay.
yeah.
Go ahead.
As close as possible, just to negate
Yeah.
a whole bunch
Yeah.
of factors, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The reason why I'm doing that is let's say now there's a road nearby. So maybe I was out front of the club, we were leaving the club, and I get thrown in the headlock and I start getting punched. And now I'm worried that if I fall down, I'm going to either one, hit my head on the concrete. So the punches aren't doing anything to me. My training hasn't kicked in yet because I was ambushed, right? And I'm just getting smashed, but it's not too bad. But now there's the environment that I'm worried about. What kind of force can I do back to them?
I apologize for complicating things, but there's a couple of other factors that I just need to
Please,
throw
yes.
in. No, that is important.
Yeah.
Why did they attack you? Were at any point during this process, were you escalating? Were you talking shit with them inside?
Mm,
Right? Like, what were you? The point is, were you an unwilling participant? Did you try to avoid the conflict and they imposed their will onto you? This is the part where people get in a lot of trouble legally,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And there's other factors. Right? But I just want to throw that part in there.
Okay. So I love it. Love it. And that was going to be my next thing. But so let's just say I was in the club. I'm with my girlfriend, but I'm just watching
Is
as
she
people go by.
is she so here we go. This is important for the audience to understand. This
Yeah.
way I keep
Yeah.
asking questions.
That's why I love it.
Are you in fear for her? Because all of the criteria for the use of force have to be met for if you're going to defend somebody else.
Yeah.
So you're not just making decisions for yourself, you're also making decisions for somebody else that you're in fear of. This is
Nice.
how
Okay.
complex this
For
is
sure. For sure.
that
I want to
that
try and
people
make
don't think about.
I want to try and make it as simple as possible for the audience. And this is what I love. No, it's great. It's great. So I'm not with my girlfriend. I'm in the club with a couple buddies.
Yeah.
We're by ourselves. We'll say buddy's girlfriend walks by and I happen to, look in her direction. He's seen that. He's like, I'm going to get this guy. I'm going to wait because until the end of the night, and he's leaving and he's probably a little inebriated now, and I'm going to ambush attack him and put him in a headlock and start punching his face. So I didn't instigate anything other than an accidental glance in a direction.
Because of the limitations of live fire and the restrictions of most live fire ranges, we've realized we have to do things differently, and we want to do things differently. We take a principle-based, integrated, and holistic approach to our training that includes pistol craft, weapons-based combatives, as well as soft self-defense skills and education, designed specifically with the citizen defender in mind, in a way that can be done anywhere by anyone. So how do we do that? What does that look like? It's not really something I can explain to you. It's something I have to show you. So stick with us, and together, we'll make the world a safer place.
Yeah. Well, in my case, his girlfriend would have been looking at me. So
Nice.
let's
There
get that
you go.
straight.
There you
I
go.
mean,
There
could you
go.
blame her? Could you blame her? You know what I mean?
It's that salt and pepper, bro. It looks good. Nice.
I
Okay,
still got it.
so the way that I think about it right now, and I'm just very simply stating, not as me as Kevin Goat, but I'm getting punched in the face. I'm now allowed to punch them in the face. Would you agree?
Yeah. And not only that, you would have been allowed to punch them in the face before they put hands on you had they shown intent.
Had they
Had they shown, well, I can't speak for Canada. I'm assuming it's the same. But in the United States, you don't have to let them throw the first punch or strike you. If they're showing intent through pre-attack indicators, which we should cover in future episodes too, right?
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
showing intent with pre-attack indicators, you can go first. Like, why would I want them to? We call it a preemptive strike.
Yeah.
So, but my preemptive strike needs to match force. So my preemptive strike has to be, in the terms that we've used today, it has to be simple. It has to be a simple assault. Right.
So
But in this case, if they've ambushed you,
yeah,
they have you in headlock and they're punching you, can you punch them back? Yeah, most certainly. You could, if you can escape that headlock for sure, you
yeah.
can counter with the same level of force that they're using.
Okay.
In legal terms.
In legal terms. And that's really, like, I think the nitty-gritty part of what we need to do is we need to help our audience understand, like, legally what are we allowed to do, because in Canada and in the UK and a lot of these places where I'm talking to these people from, they're like, listen, man, like, I didn't know what I was allowed to do, right? Because I've been in a fight before, right? And I'm like, well, that's different story already. They're like, well, just let me continue. I was like, sure. And they're like, I've been in a fight before where I was verbally threatened and the guy was setting things, but because I didn't set a physical boundary, I threw the first punches on CCTV and to witnesses, it looked like the guy was yelling at me, so I punched him in the face.
Yeah.
Right. So
listen, this bleeds into so many other topics, right? That we talked about the other day, like the 5 stages of violent crime. How do we use deterrence? What is de-escalation? There's a lot that goes into this. What's my body language saying verbally and non-verbally? This is why education is so important, because people assume they know, but they don't. I mean, there's a lot that goes into this, and it isn't, you can't just have an intellectual understanding of it. You have to train it. You have to practice it, so that, and you should practice it with somebody who has a trained eye who can guide you through this. Because people swear that they know, and then I'll look and I'll say, hey, look, have you thought about this, this, and this? We may want to think, and they'll look at me like, oh my gosh, like, no one's ever taught me that before. I'm like, well, you have an amazing resume. How has somebody never taught you that before? Because they don't know either, or they just want to make you feel like you know what you're doing when you don't.
Well, and that's it, right? Like, well, one of the things that I teach my students is, because it has to be quick, it has to be easy to memorize. It has to be something they can practice at home with their family, especially with kids and things like that in school and bullying. And one thing that I tell my students is actually from Chael Sonnen, the UFC fighter, right? When Wanderlei like wanted to, get up in his face, and he set a verbal boundary right away. I can't let you get any closer, right? And then the second that he entered the space, right, is he chose to engage. Chael engaged with push and sent him away, which is great. I try and tell my students the same thing, but I say, if you're going to enter, there's no coming back. The second that you choose to engage into that, I need you hands-on. I need you to eliminate the threat. And that's a very, very dicey thing that we talk a lot about in my self-defense classes. What does it mean to have the threat eliminated? right? And how far does that go? But I don't want to digress too far
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, and that bleeds into fight IQ. Like,
Oh,
that's why,
right.
again, for those of you who don't know, the name of my business is called Integrative Defense Strategies. So you see why, I hope now. And this is the simple stuff, really,
Yeah.
like literally and figuratively the simple stuff, right? We
Yeah.
have to integrate multiple disciplines and modalities,
Yeah.
understanding the psychology of violent crime, of course, like it's just endless, right?
Yeah.
But these things have to all be baked into cake together at the same time. They have to be coupled. They can't be fragmented and fractured and separate in
Awesome.
silos.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And they can't, right? And that's kind of my role today for people that are putting together is how can we make all of this very hard, complicated stuff to kind of a moment in time that you can have discussions with your family and your friends
yeah,
about of what
yeah,
you're engaging in. So
yeah,
okay, so that was I always like talking about certain styles of fighters or certain styles of attackers, right? So this guy put me in a headlock, he starts punching me. That's more of a puncher. Okay. Jiu-jitsu, judo is now being trained, if not the most trained martial art in the world these days. Let's say guy comes out to me again, ambush. I didn't aggravate anything. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't instigate all this. We're the same size still, just to make life easy. Okay, he comes up, he ambush attacks me, he puts me in a headlock and immediately finds my elbow and goes for a nice judo throw. I end up on the ground, he's in side control, and he switches to knee on belly and starts punching me in the face then. The punches aren't hard enough. Again, I'm not feeling super worried about going unconscious, but what I am worried about is I'm getting hit and now the concrete floor is behind me and now I'm
yeah,
getting rocked and now I'm getting dizzy
yeah,
and things are
yeah,
getting worse.
yeah. I'm sure some of the audience is familiar with the sorry, um, I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. It was
George
inhabited in
Floyd?
Florida. No, um,
Yeah,
I'm
let's
drawing
not
a
talk
blank on
about
the name.
that.
Drawing a blank on the name right now. But there was a famous shooting that happened in Florida where a guy was ambushed. Oh, that's a case I talk about all the time too. And that's
Okay.
exactly what happened. He was being grounded and pounded. And he was armed. The
Yeah,
back of his head was hitting the concrete. And unfortunately, there was physical evidence. There was blood on his head and the concrete in the same spot.
yeah,
So the moment that happens, you can all see this is why decision making is so important. The moment I'm starting to feel that or know
yeah,
that's reasonably could happen, I'm
yeah.
already thinking, okay, I'm justified to go to a higher level of force
Mm-hmm.
because one, my brain may never be the same. I could have a
Yeah,
permanent brain injury here,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And two, if I lose consciousness and I'm armed or unarmed, it's
yeah,
very easy for him to use my weapon on me or to kill me while I'm unconscious or
yeah,
seriously injure me while unconscious. So that would be a time where you could articulate. Listen, I was ambushed. My head was about to hit the concrete or was hitting the concrete. I felt as though I reasonably had no other option than to go that level of force. And by the way, that's called preclusion.
preclusion.
Preclusion means you reasonably had no other option than to go to the level of force that you went to.
Okay.
If you hadn't used that level of force, then you would have been seriously injured or killed or injured worse.
Okay, so let's
That's an
just say, so he was armed in that case with a pistol, right? Let's say that we're in Canada, UK, Australia, and we obviously can't carry that, and we're not allowed to really use any self-defense tool to defend ourselves. So let's just say legally, we find a rock on the ground and we're getting smashed, and we just happen to grab the rock and we smash them
yeah,
because we're now past simple assault and we're at aggravated assault, we're
yeah.
allowed to use a weapon?
I'm not going to give an absolute answer
For sure,
because there's
please
no,
don't. Yeah. Yeah,
because
disclaimer, this is not legal
but,
advice.
but, but I'm very, no, it's not legal advice. And there is no absolute answer. Like I said
Okay.
earlier, it's going to come down to, it's going to be subjective.
Okay.
But generally speaking, in a situation where where you are reasonably faced with immediate fear of substantial or great bodily or grievous bodily harm, that's another term.
Okay.
Grievous means great bodily harm or death. So
Okay.
substantial or grievous bodily harm.
Yeah.
Could you use an improvised weapon
Yes.
that as a force multiplier, that could be used, that could be interpreted as the use of lethal force when you're faced with lethal force. Generally speaking, the answer to that question would be yes, probably.
Okay. Okay. So this is where I think the comment section takes it too far, depending on the type of personality. Is you've hit the person with the rock, they've stumbled back, you stand back up to your feet, and you continue to engage.
I'll tell. Here's something that I would probably do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would use the rock, and if he was knee on belly, I would start smashing his knee with the rock
Okay.
instead of going to his head. Sort of like if I had a baton. If I have to use a baton, I don't want to use a baton to the head. I would rather use a baton to other parts of the body because
Yeah.
it's less lethal, and I could articulate that I was using a less lethal option
Okay.
intentionally. I could say that
Yeah.
in my statement. I didn't want to kill the guy. I felt as if I needed a force multiplier. But then if that still wasn't working and it continued to escalate, then I could say I felt as though I had to go to a higher level of force at that time because this wasn't being effective. Like chances are good they're on some type of a drug and they're adrenalized. So
Yeah.
they're not feeling a thing. But
Yeah.
if I can stop them by going to the legs first, I'm not saying shoot them in the leg. Maybe if you're entangled as a
Yeah.
tactic. But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is, that's that. Just so you know, you could still use your force multiplier in a less lethal way first.
Okay,
So
I'm
that
gonna, I'm
now,
gonna devil's
but
advocate that. No, I'm gonna devil's advocate that because this is a tough one for me, right? Because it's like if my life is already being threatened, if I know possibly am getting brain injured, and I start
yeah,
smashing to the knee, and
yeah,
he is drunk or he is on
yeah,
drugs,
yeah.
and and
Be
the three
careful. Be careful
shots
with
they,
that. Be
yeah,
careful with that. Be careful with that.
okay, okay,
Okay, we gotta be careful with that. Okay, so that's going to come down to what the moral values are a necessity for that individual in that moment.
okay, okay. So
Okay.
let's say in the time I'm smashing the knee or the rib cage, and no, let's stay away from rib cage because lung punctures and organs.
Okay.
So I'm smashing the knee, and in the 3 hits I attempt to hit him in the knee, I've eaten enough shots now with his fists because I
Yeah.
don't have the guard that I had before, and I'm dead.
Yeah. That's the decision that you're going to have to make in that moment. That's why it's called a continuum.
Yeah, yeah,
And only you can know in that moment. What I was stating was you may be able to use that option first.
okay,
I'm not saying you should use that option first.
yeah,
I'm saying
yeah,
you may be able to use that option first because we need to understand like the legal risks are very real.
oh yeah,
And not only that, the civil case is very real. You can be 1000% justified and
yeah,
lose everything you've worked for your whole life. So if you feel as though you can go to a lesser force option first reasonably,
yeah,
you should. But if you can't go to a lesser force option reasonably, that's what that preclusion is.
yeah.
Then go to the level of force that's necessary to stop the threat as quickly as possible.
Yeah. See, and that's a tough
Be-
one. Like right there, I went into training
It's
police officers again, right? And how hard their job is, right? Because I was actually was at a
yeah,
Gavin Santos seminar, right? And he goes, I absolutely love training military. I get to show them all the super cool, hard as F
yeah.
stuff that we train Filipino martial arts for. This is where you stick the knife in. This is how you cut it out quick. This is where you puncture lung, right? He's like training civilians. He's like, it's the artsy, it's the flow. Here we're doing 2 sticks. I'm flowing together. I'm feeling good. I'm treating it more like a dance. I'm doing something active and
He's
healthy.
playing the drums. He's playing the drums.
Right? The bongos on your nuts, right? And then he's like, but the hardest to train are the police officers because you have to have the decision-making skills that we've talked about so much. And you have to have them so tuned in and onto you. So when people give cops a hard time for excessive force, it's
They have
like,
no idea. Yeah.
you have no idea. No idea.
They
And
can do their
it's so
job.
tough.
Very people who understand that law enforcement can go to prison for doing their job as trained.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't realize that.
Yeah.
They can do their job as trained and still go to prison.
Yeah.
And
Right.
chances
Well,
are
and
good
it's
that their politicians are just going to throw them under the bus no matter how, like, they're faced with impossible circumstances. So, by the way, so can we as citizen defenders, where
for sure. Yeah.
you have to choose between a bad situation and a worse one. What's the least bad decision for me to make right, in a fraction of a second under extreme stress?
Yeah.
It's the point. The problem is that our society as a whole has
Yeah.
a very unrealistic expectation for human performance under extreme stress under these
Yes.
conditions.
Yeah.
And that's one of my goals and one of my objectives is to, and part of these conversations is to give the world a more realistic expectation for the use of force
Yeah.
against violence, right?
Well, and it's to, for me, I don't want any of my students to have to go through these things, but what I tell them to do is I'm like, mentally go through these scenarios in your mind and create your own rules of engagement, because my rules of engagement when I'm by myself are completely different than when I'm with my family, than if I'm just with my son, or if I'm with my mom who has to use a
Yeah.
walker now. Everything has changed, right? And then, like you said today, is I got spinal injections yesterday. Like, my use of force is way different today than it is yesterday, right? And so,
Yeah.
okay, so awesome. Okay, I'm gonna throw in another one. Okay, so we get headlocked again, size, everything's same. We're exact same scenario. Still a BJJ slash judo guy, but more BJJ guys. So he's not BJJ into ground and pound. He goes judo throw to side control, and he pulls an arm bar on me, and he starts to threaten to snap and break my arm. Where are we now within the simple versus aggregate?
That's aggravated
Okay.
because you're reasonably in immediate fear of substantial bodily harm, meaning that there's a good chance that arm will never be the same. Even if it heals, even if you can use it again, you could reasonably articulate my arm is still never the same. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't perform nearly as well as what it used to. I'm
Yeah.
not going to die from it,
Yeah.
maybe, but see, here's where it gets complicated.
Yeah.
If that arm breaks, now I can no longer continue to defend myself, probably very well, because I have a broken limb.
Yeah.
So now in my case, that arm is broken. Now that he could
Hold on, hold
now,
on.
how hard is it going to be
Hold on,
for
you're
me?
breaking up. You're breaking up.
Probably because I had a call. How am I now?
Okay. Yeah, you're good now. You had just said my arm is completely broken.
So I can't remember where I was, but is my if my arm is completely broken and I'm carrying a firearm or another force multiplier like an edge weapon, for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
can I continue to retain that weapon now that this arm is broken?
Mm.
Okay, and so there isn't a lot of um, legal precedent on this,
Yeah.
but I think you can articulate that if he was going to substantial or even great bodily harm or death, right? Great bodily harm means permanent loss or impairment of any bodily member or organ. Substantial means temporary.
Okay.
So it's for sure substantial. He's at least showing intent for substantial. And you
Yeah.
could argue that's permanent. That's going to be
Mhm.
permanent damage,
Yeah.
even if I'm not going to die from it. So you may be able to articulate that you could go to a higher level of force there with a lethal force multiplier. Also, if you're the person pulling the armbar, which we'll talk about probably in future episodes, grappling in a weapons-based and self-defense environment,
Yeah.
well, you just gave that person an opportunity and justification to use a force multiplier on you.
Yeah.
Nice job with the armbar.
Yeah.
Terrible tactical decision and
For
terrible
sure.
legal decision too.
Yeah.
And that's my problem with jujitsu being taught as self-defense.
Yeah.
It's not.
Well, I like you and I are both jits guys, and we understand.
Aspects of it.
Yeah. Well, and there's such a different curriculum that I have built for self-defense in my BJJ program. I learned a very traditional system from Sensei Alex Rogue. He's actually out in Alabama. Make sure to check him out, guys. he's fantastic, but he's old school jits. I didn't want competition jits. I didn't want all these things. I wanted the old school jits and mentality.
Yeah.
And when I did my black belt test, he's like, I want you to present to me what you're going to show the world and what you're going to do for your system. Because I don't train people for competition for jujitsu. I train people
Yeah,
with
I
the
don't.
idea and the mindset that you have to train and do different things now. If you're, again, saying guard and you sweep to mount, you should be thinking about, how do I disengage
Don't
right now? How do
you?
I get away from the situation?
I've got. I will not even going to mount if I sweep them.
Exactly. Right.
I'm not even going to mount, posting on their head and escaping. I'm not even going to
Yep.
mount because now I'm entangled with them.
Exactly.
Right.
Right. But a lot
And
of
that's a
people
whole
don't
nother.
understand that. Yeah.
That's a whole nother rabbit hole, isn't it?
I love that. Yeah. We'll talk for hours about that one.
Yeah.
So he's gone to it. So you went to, if we have a force multiplier, what if they don't? So let's say it's at that point where your arm has been broken.
The victim does not have a force multiplier.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So the arm has been broken at this point, right? Where are you allowed to go? Like this is kind of a tough one, because it's like, let's say just by chance, I'm grabbing my arm because I'm feeling it about to be stabbed, and I'm grabbing my arm and I know it's close and I don't know jujitsu. I don't know how to escape out of the armbar. And now instead, because I'm in bodily harm, or would it be grievance at this point?
It could be one or the other. It could be either one. It could reasonably be both. It could be substantial or grievous bodily harm. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say, well, it doesn't have to be, so it could be both. It's at that point, and I gouge out his eyeball in hopes that my arm won't break. Is that not matching force for force? Grievance and bodily harm, grievance and bodily harm. I'm okay legally.
Again, there's no absolute answer, and so I'm not going to give an absolute answer.
For sure.
But perhaps you may be able to articulate that. Okay. On the decision-making side of it, that the attacker is the aggressor is in the dominant position. Yeah. So if you want to gouge out their eye, it's called echo proxy. They're probably going to gouge your eye out too. And now you have a broken arm, and you're not in the dominant position. They're in the dominant position. Yeah. So when we talk about, fish hooks and eye gouges and ear rips and stuff like that, I would really recommend make sure you're in the dominant position before you do that, because now they're going to do it right back to you, and you're on bottom or you're stuck somewhere. And
totally agree. So but let's pretend I don't know martial arts, because the reason why I chose the eye gouge, right, is because the eye gouge is like this miraculous thing that works all the time. I have been gouged so hard before and still fought the rest of the round, and then drove myself to the hospital, right? Like, people are ridiculous with like fish hooks and ear. I'm not really worried. Maybe the ear, I guess I only have one ear. So if my ear was permanently damaged because somebody ripped it off or tried to Mike Tyson it, it's a different story. The reason I went to the eyeball is because the eye will maybe let him let go, right? I was going to use, like, I went to the trachea and grabbed the trachea and just ripped it out, right? But I think both of those are like, the difference with the eyeball is I'm not trying to murder him. The difference with the throat is I'm trying to kill him.
That could kill him, though.
It could.
They could kill him. They could kill him. They could hemorrhage to death internally from that. But the point is, though, matching force was force. Yeah. Right. So some version of that where you're using the same level of force that they're using to get them to stop. I'm sorry, cover my face. The audience is probably happy about that. Todd, cover your face up.
Except for that girl at the club.
I got the looks for. You're right. Well, the girl at the club actually did. Well, that's another conversation. That's what the point would be. Some level of force that equals theirs that stops that can reasonably stop it.
Okay.
Right. Maybe you find a sharp piece of glass on the ground and you go to start cutting their leg open.
But improvised weapon, right? I'm really just
to stick.
no improvised weapon. What am I allowed to legally do? Because
Yeah.
they're breaking my arm and it's going to be injured for the rest of my life for sure.
Yeah. But the point is also once they, not to the point here, but then once they stop, you must stop. So if they break your arm and they stop,
Yeah.
by law, you must stop. You can't get up and if they stop and you retaliate,
Mm,
you can defend, you can be on defense, but you can't be like paybacks are a bitch, dude. You just broke my arm.
wow. Yeah.
And now I'm coming after you. Once they stop, you must stop. As long as that they're stopping within reason.
Yeah. Hey, that was such a great point. I could just hear the comment section right there, like, this mofo did this to me. I gotta get him. And it's like, no, it's ego. Like, there's no more threat anymore. Right?
There, you
For
this
whatever
is the part.
reason.
This is the part of understanding this because then you're going to jail.
Yeah.
They attacked you, and you're the one going to jail
So
longer
then
than
for
they
those
are.
people in the comment section, if they break your arm, leave it as that and sue their asses. That's basically all you have. That's the only, payback's a bitch thing you could do to them, right?
That
As
yeah,
an
that would
ambush
be
attack.
yeah. We don't use self-defense punitively. We don't punish,
Yeah.
right? So yeah,
Okay. Judo dude again hits the throw. We're on the ground. He chooses to not just go for the armbar this time, but he does a back take, throws you in a rear naked choke, and you're about to go to sleep. I think it's an easy one with our discussion that we've had now, but just to help our audience, it goes
the
immediately.
moment they go for the throw, or even like they don't even have to be there yet. Like
Okay.
if I can articulate, he's fighting for the throat while I'm defending, or I know this guy's really good. He can. Most people don't realize how fast you're incapacitated with the rear naked choke. I mean, all if it's a good rear naked choke, you're incapacitated almost immediately. So there's
Yeah.
almost no time for you to do anything.
Yeah.
So you might have to work preemptively. But the moment I can articulate that they're even attempting to go for the throat while I'm defending and fighting that, or if they just go around my neck at all reasonably,
Yeah.
even if it's unintentional, I
Yeah.
felt their hand go around my throat. It can sink in a fraction of a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would be justified for sure at that point to go to whatever reasonable level of force would stop that threat.
Yeah. And it's because the airway is being taken away. And like you said, that will force you to go unconscious. And unconscious, armed or unarmed, is a very dangerous state to where your life is now in danger. So you have to choose to be able to go to there. I
Yeah,
think
and the
that
blood
was great.
too. The blood will incapacitate you faster than the air.
Yes, very true. Very true. Right. So yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways it can go, right? And like today, really our main goal is talking about the different types of assault. I think we can continue this conversation again and really just show people, okay, now let's talk about the data of all of the types of assaults that are out there, right? And today should give you a really good understanding. In the most succinct way, can you kind of paraphrase what we did in 45 to an hour and just kind of, assault 101?
Sure, Kevin.
Throw you
Just
on
put
the
me on the
spot.
spot. Put me on the spot, Kevin. Yeah. Hey, Todd, take an hour's worth of conversation
Yeah.
and
Come
put
on.
it down to 40. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate
So
that.
easy. It's so easy. You're the expert.
Understand understand the use of force continuum. Use the same level of force that's coming against you without going beyond that level of force. Once a threat has been stopped, you must stop. The moment you have a reasonable means of retreat, you must retreat. In most cases, that's going to be not all, but in most cases, that's going to be the framework.
Yeah.
And train and practice where your physical skills are coupled with your decision making skills, tactical decision making and legal decision making.
Yeah.
Several all of your decision making is coupled with it at the same time, and train it to the point of unconscious competence so that you don't have to. That's not the time for you to think about it. You need to have these things worked out in advance. Is that
Yeah.
45 seconds? I think
Sorry.
it was.
Hold on. My son just got out and I can hear him taking a piss. So you might have to redo all of that. It's like, I heard the toothbrush. I was like, you little
I
bugger, you're
could,
not supposed to be in the
I could,
bathroom. And then the
I
door's
couldn't,
completely open. I hear
I couldn't hear it
you
because I
could
have
okay.
the, no, I
Hopefully
couldn't
it's
hear
good. But we're gonna have you just throw it again. Grayson,
it. Ah, that's great. I
that's
say leave it.
hilarious.
I say leave it
This is
in,
with the
dude.
door open, of course,
I
right?
say leave it in, dude.
Okay, ready? Ready? Okay, try hit that again.
Okay, so 45 seconds or less.
Yeah.
The general premise is using the same level of force in the use of force continuum,
Yeah.
using the same level of force that comes against you without going beyond that level of force.
Yeah.
Once the threat has stopped, you must stop reasonably. Once you have a reasonable means of retreat, in most cases, you must retreat. And if they're retreating, if they're not going to be harming somebody else, you must allow them to retreat as well. We
Okay.
can't use self-defense punitively.
Okay.
There's simple assaults where you're reasonably in immediate fear of bodily harm, getting banged and bruised, scraped up. There's substantial bodily harm, right? Prolonged loss or impairment of any bodily member or organ. So it's going to be prolonged but not permanent. And then grievous bodily harm or substantial bodily harm or death, which is where you're reasonably in immediate fear of permanent disfigurement or damage or dying. So the use of force continuum falls within those that framework as a generalization.
Awesome. Awesome. Well said. Thank you. You
Yeah,
killed it. You killed it. You know, on the spot. There you
yeah,
go.
right on, right on, right on. Yeah,
Well,
it's
and it's
important, guys. It's so important. It's so important, and it's overlooked. It's ignored.
yeah,
It's not addressed as it should be, and it's definitely not trained as it should be because
yeah.
it's not
Well,
sexy. It's
yeah,
not sexy,
that's, I was just gonna say it. It's like you have to sit down and do training,
and it
mental training
requires
in order to understand this. And that
and
means you need information,
it
right?
requires failure.
Yeah.
Like when you're training this in this way, you'll fail a lot. You'll make mistakes with your decision making. But man, better to make mistakes in your training practice than out on the street.
Isn't that the truth, right? And I mean that's why we both train in martial arts and we both do what we do. We just train what I'm going to label as for myself anyways of I train with the self-defense mindset, right? So I
Yes.
still do martial arts, but while I'm doing martial arts, I'm training with this self-defense mindset. It's like,
Yep.
you know, real quick, it's like if I'm training, you know, mid drills and entering with a jab cross, I'm telling myself I've set a boundary already. The person is not choosing to listen to my boundary. I feel verbally and physically threatened right now. I've
Yeah.
given verbal command, like I can't let you get in
Yes.
closer. They're getting closer. I need to protect myself, depend on my state of being, or my family, my environment. I have to engage. I enter and I engage.
Yeah.
Right. And
Context dictates strategy.
yeah,
Then in a suggestion for those that are watching, and everything I've said, by the way, is a suggestion
yeah,
for your consideration, because personal protection is personal, should be up to you to decide.
yeah,
Um, but here's a suggestion that not for you, Kevin, necessarily, but for the audience.
yeah.
One of the things that we do when we're doing mitts work like that or striking for self-defense is we'll have whoever is holding mitts show pre-attack indicators.
Nice.
So
Nice.
that way they're learning to pick up on the cues. What are
Mhm.
the top, say, 12 pre-attack indicators clustered? They're
Yeah.
learning to pick up on those clustered pre-attack indicators so they can articulate, they know it's coming, and then the other person is actually telegraphing their intent, aren't they? So
Yeah.
we can learn. The point is we can learn to anticipate.
Yeah.
And people who are really well trained and high performers, they're always anticipating what's coming next because they're trained to pick up on those cues and have
Beautiful.
reflexes to respond to it. Yeah,
Love it. Love it. Right. And so, and it's, that's something that you guys can practice at home too. You know, it's not something that just needs to be done at
for
a
sure,
dojo. It's something that, you know,
for sure.
you can teach your kids about it if
Yeah,
you don't believe the
yeah,
same way that Todd
yeah.
and I do,
And
but
and and shameless plug. I think there'll be an ad in this, but you can go to my online program,
nice.
ideascitizendefender.com, and we literally have courses that you can follow for this at home, whether you're armed or whether you're unarmed.
Nice.
Look for the course called the 5 Stages of Violent Crime, and
Sweet.
that will help give you a framework for training and practicing this stuff at home.
That's awesome. Yeah, and make sure you check out my stuff too. So I have a full digital course on BuddhaBrothers.com. Use KG Defense, all capitals, for a 20% discount as well, guys. Thanks, Todd. That was awesome.
Thank thank
Definitely
you.
look forward to continuing this conversation.
Yeah, we'll keep spreading the knowledge. Thank you for everybody that's watching. Really appreciate you guys being here. And Kevin and I just know this is why we do this. We want to give you the information that you need and give you permission to be what you are. If you're watching this still, you probably have it in your DNA to watch over the flock. You're probably a natural citizen defender. So be bold about that. There's no apology for you to be protective over what is good and what is innocent. It's what you were born to do.
For sure. Right on. All right, everybody. Stay safe.
Amen.
Sick, bro.
Yeah.